Imagine we're conducting a small exit poll on election day, and here's one of the questions we're going to ask the voters. Who did you choose for mayor? And here are the possible choices for mayor. Ideally, we'd like to tally the results of the exit poll using a really fast data structure. So what data structure should we use? Now, there are several possible data structures we could use, but if we want to use a really fast data structure, one choice that goes to the top of the list is maps. Maps are key value data structures, and in Elixir, you can use any data type for both keys and values. So if we were going to use a map to tally the votes for this polling question, we could use this unique ID as the key, and we could use an integer for the value, which would essentially be the running vote total. The way you construct a map is with the following syntax: a % followed by a set of curly braces. In this case, since there's nothing in between the curly braces, it represents an empty map. Let's use the iHelper function to learn more about the map type. Okay, there's not a whole lot to see here. The data type is called map. It has a reference module named map, which is pretty consistent with the other data types we've seen so far. So, odds are, if you need to do something with a map, like adding something to it or removing something from it, and you're not sure how to do it, you should probably look at this map module to see if there's a function that does what you're looking for. Do you remember how to see what functions are available in a module? Well, if you're in IEX, you can just key the module name, map in this case, add a dot, and then press the tab key, and then you'll see all the public functions from this module. Let's say we want to remove something from a map. Which function would we use? Well, this delete function looks like a pretty good guess, right? So the next question you might have on this delete function is, how do you use it? Well, if you don't know how to use a function, how can you find out? Do you remember? To learn more about a function, you can call the helper function, passing in the name of whatever it is you're wanting help on. So in our case, the map module's delete function. Oh, is that syntax right? I didn't use parentheses. Do you think this will work without parentheses? Let's see. It worked. So here's the thing. I've told you to use parentheses so far in this course, but technically in a lot of cases they aren't necessary. You're probably wondering, should I use them? Should I not use them? It depends. When you're in IEX like this, I don't think it really matters. Do whatever's easiest. However, when you're writing Elixir in actual source files, then you should probably follow the convention of the Elixir community. So if other people have to look at your code, it matches their expectations. In a later video, I'll show you where you can find the community style guide, and then I'll show you an automated tool you can use so you don't have to worry about how to format your code. This tool I'm referring to will format your code for you. I want to circle back to the output from the iHelper function for maps. So far, we've mostly ignored this output here, the implemented protocols. Now, I'm not ignoring this because it's not important. No, it is very important, and we'll cover it eventually, but for now, I just want to draw your attention to these two words here: collectible and enumerable. These are pretty important, and you're going to see them over and over again as we look at more data structures. So for now, make a mental note that maps implement these two protocols. I think having this awareness will be pretty helpful later when we go over what protocols are and how they're useful. Okay, let's create some maps that actually have keys and values. Let's say we'd like to create a map that's initialized with the three possible choices you see here. In this case, we'd use the same map syntax you saw a moment ago, but then inside the curly braces, we'll add a value for the key. So for the first choice, the key would be the unique ID, the 1. The syntax used to separate the keys from the values, in this case, is a fat arrow, followed by the value, which we'll set to be 0. To add additional key value pairs to the map, you just use a comma and enter the next key value pair. So the next key will be 2, and its initial value will be 0. Then we'll add one more comma and set the final key to be 3, and we'll set its value to be 0 as well. Now, just for convenience, let's bind a variable named tally to this map. Okay, imagine we're doing the exit poll, and somebody tells us they voted for Will Ferrell. So what do we need to do to our map? Well, Will's ID is number 1, so we should increment the value for the key that's the integer 1. The syntax for updating an existing key in a map looks like this. Basically, you use the same map syntax we use to create a brand new map, a percentage sign followed by a set of curly braces, but then inside the curly braces, we'll include the map we want to update, which is bound to the tally variable. Then we'll use the pipe character followed by the key we want to update, 1. And then we'll use a fat arrow to delimit the key from the value, and we'll just enter the new value, which should be 1. Now when I press enter, you see the updated map printed in the terminal. Here's a question for you. Do you think the variable tally has the value you see printed here? In other words, did we change the value of tally? Let's see. I'll key in tally, and I'll press enter, and as you can see here, tally wasn't updated. It still contains the same map we originally created, where all the values are 0. Let's do this. I'll hit the up arrow a couple of times to pull up the update expression, and I'll move the cursor all the way to the left, and I'll key in a new variable named tally2, and I'll bind it to the value returned by this expression we created a moment ago. Now, if we check the value of tally, you see that it still hasn't changed. However, tally2's value is the updated map. This is the first hint we've seen of a very important concept in Elixir, which is that all data in Elixir is immutable. In other words, data in Elixir can never be changed. You see that because the data that tally is pointing to didn't change. It literally can't be changed. However, it can be copied and updated in one atomic step, which is what we did in this expression, and then we bound the result of this expression to the variable tally2. So why is this? I mean, why can't we change or mutate data? Well, we're going to talk about this in more depth later, but for now, consider this question. What's simpler, data that never changes or data that can be changed? Well, by definition, data that never changes is simpler. And if you use the simplest possible building blocks in your applications, you're more likely to build software that's simpler and easier to understand, and less likely to have hard to find and fix bugs. Now, there's more to the story on why Elixir uses immutable data, and we'll get to that. But for now, just think of immutable data as the simpler option. So here's the next thing I'd like to do with our tally. I'd like to see how many votes Will Ferrell has. One way of getting Will Ferrell's vote count is with the following syntax. I'll key tally2, the variable that points to the updated map. Then at the end, I'll add a set of square brackets, and in between the square brackets, I'll specify the key I'm wanting the value of, which is the number 1. And as you can see here in the terminal, Will Ferrell has received 1 vote. A moment ago, I mentioned the fact that you can use any data type for the keys and values in maps. In our example, we used integers for both the keys and the values, but we could have used floats or strings or any other type. And you can use the exact same syntax with these other types. But there's a couple of additional syntax options you can use in one particular scenario. So what's the scenario I'm talking about? Well, if you use atoms for the keys in a map, you've got a couple of nice syntax options. For discussion's sake, let's say we'd like to create a map to tally votes, but instead of using the unique ID as the key, we decide to use atoms for the keys. Now you could use the exact same syntax to construct a new map, which would look something like this. Alternatively, you can drop the fat arrows and you can shift the colon from the beginning of the atom to the end of the atom. Additionally, if you want to access the value for a key and the key is an atom, you can use dot notation instead of bracket notation. It's important you realize you can only use dot notation like this if the key is an atom. I've got one quick tangential question for you. Is using names as atoms, like I did here, okay? Or do you think it's a bad idea? Well, I'd say it's hard to know for sure in this case, but it is a bit smelly. Why do I say that? Well, if you recall, when you use an atom, it's stored in memory in a table, and that memory is never garbage collected. So you should be cautious in how you use atoms. When you see very specific atoms, like people's names, it makes me wonder where these atoms came from. In particular, I'm concerned that these atoms may be coming from user input of some sort, which is problematic. The bottom line is, don't be scared to use atoms, but be cautious in how you use them, because misusing them can lead to painful problems. Okay, so you've seen how to create a map, and how to update an existing value in a map, and how to access a value in a map. But there's a bunch of other things you'll need to do with maps, like inserting a new key-value pair, and deleting a key-value pair, and merging maps, just to name a few. Additionally, the way I showed you how to update a map and access a value in a map can be problematic in certain scenarios and could throw errors. Now, I could try and show you all the different things you can do with maps, but I don't think I would be serving you well. It's not the best use of your time. It's better for you to start learning how to figure these things out on your own, so I've put together some exercises that'll guide you towards figuring out how to interact with maps on your own. You'll see instructions on how to complete these exercises after this video. In the next video, we'll look at how you create and use lists in Elixir.